The sight of zip ties biting into my 12-year-old son's wrists as the HOA president dragged him toward her garage, that's a picture I still can't shake, not even in the middle of the night when everything's quiet and you're supposed to feel safe in your own home. My son Kieran is autistic, and his meltdown echoed through our cul-de-sac that morning while she screamed about disturbing the peace. What Celeste Blackwood didn't know, what nobody in our neighborhood really knew, was that I prosecute federal kidnapping cases for a living, and in exactly 7 minutes, FBI agents would be kicking down her front door. Before I get into how an ordinary Saturday in Maplewood Estates turned into a federal case that blew the lid off a network of hate and harassment I never saw coming, I just want to say stories like Kieran's matter. If any of this hits home for you or you know someone fighting similar battles, let this story be a reminder you are not alone. Your support helps stories like ours reach people who need to know hope is still out there, even on days when the world feels out to get you. My name is Dominic Castanos. Until that October morning, my neighbors knew me as the quiet guy who worked from home, always pacing the patio in the mornings, phone pressed to my ear, mumbling about project deadlines and client meetings. That's what I let folks believe anyway. In reality, those 7 a.m. calls weren't about budgets. They were federal briefings on witness protection, kidnapping investigations, all the headline stuff that keeps families safe but makes you a target when the wrong people find out. My so-called consulting job was a wall I put up for my family's privacy. Turns out that same double life would end up saving us. Kieran is the kind of kid who can tell you what kind of plane is overhead just by the engine sound, who solves math puzzles most adults can't even read, who remembers entire conversations from months ago, but the world is just too loud for him sometimes. Autism means bright lights, sudden noises, even a change in routine can feel like earthquakes. The only way he can regulate is by stimming, flapping his hands, humming, pacing, blocking out the world with his red noise-canceling headphones. Those headphones might as well be a life vest, the way they keep him afloat. It's a balance parenting him, letting him grow, keeping him safe. But what makes Kieran special isn't just his autism, it's the way he sees things nobody else does. He can pick out patterns in people's behavior, notice when something's off. And let me tell you, that ended up mattering more than I ever realized. Celeste Blackwood moved in 8 months earlier. Impeccable, always in heels, the type who shows up with a clipboard and a mission. She didn't waste time becoming queen of the HOA, promising to whip Maplewood Estates into shape and protect our property values. At first it seemed like typical new neighbor stuff, but the way she watched our house, taking notes, lingering outside our driveway, studying us like we were some kind of case study, set off my radar. Other folks got welcome baskets. We got surveillance. 6 weeks before that Saturday, Kieran was outside spinning and humming in our fenced yard, doing what he needed to do after a rough day. It wasn't loud. He wasn't bothering anyone, but here came Celeste's citation in hand, video already rolling. Mr. Castanos, I'm issuing a formal noise violation for excessive disturbance during quiet hours, she announced, full of fake concern. Quiet hours. It was 2:30 in the afternoon on a Thursday. I tried to explain about Kieran's autism, about the need for compassion, but she wasn't interested. Special needs don't grant special privileges. She snapped her lens, zeroing in on Kieran. That's when I realized she was collecting evidence, learning our patterns, waiting for her moment. 4 weeks later, she was back, this time calling Kieran's therapy swing a safety hazard, threatening Child Protective Services if we didn't remove it. She had photos taken from angles that meant she'd been snooping around our backyard. That night, Kieran told me he'd heard Celeste talking on her phone about federal employees and special treatment. His hearing is razor sharp. He catches things I'd never notice. He'd also picked up on something else every Tuesday and Friday, the same silver car parked across the street when I was on work calls, always leaving when I hung up. Kieran noticed the surveillance before I did, and that's saying something. So when that October Saturday rolled around, cool, perfect for pancakes and an airplane documentary marathon, I had no reason to expect it would end any differently than the hundreds of other mornings we'd weathered as a family. At 7:15, my secure phone rang. There was an urgent case. A family in witness protection needed immediate help. I told Kieran I had to work, asked him to play outside, promised pancakes when I was done. Our yard is fenced, cameras everywhere, safe as a suburban yard can be, or so I thought. About 25 minutes into my call, the neighbors' landscapers fired up their blowers and trimmers. The sudden noise hit Kieran like a wall. His headphones, for once, were inside charging. I saw him through my window, hands over his ears, rocking, trying to self-soothe. Normally, I'd have gone to him in a heartbeat, but my call was at a critical point. I made the choice to finish something I still regret. That was the window Celeste had been waiting for. She emerged from her house, her own cameras turned off, moving straight for our yard. She called out, "Kieran, honey, you're really disturbing everyone," her voice broadcast for all the neighbors to hear, setting up her excuse. Kieran tried to explain, but he was deep in sensory overload. His words jumbled, his fear rising. Without hesitation, Celeste opened our gate and stepped onto our property. "If you can't control yourself, someone needs to help you learn appropriate behavior," she said, pulling out zip ties from her jacket. Not tape, not rope, zip ties. She was ready for this. She grabbed him. He screamed. He begged for help, but my office was soundproof. The blowers drowned him out for everyone else. Celeste tightened the restraints, dragged him toward her garage, hissing, "Your father thinks he can hide behind his fancy job, but you people get advantages normal families don't." Kieran's terror escalated. The zip ties bit deep. His meltdown spiraled. Across the street, Mrs. Rodriguez was gardening. She heard enough to know this wasn't an autistic episode, but a child in real trouble. She started recording, yelling, "What are you doing to that boy?" Celeste, too far gone, snarled, "This child is a danger to our community. Someone has to intervene." She dragged my son, convinced she'd be the neighborhood savior. Somewhere in that chaos, my federal call ended and I heard my son's screams, the kind you never forget. I bolted outside, saw my empty yard, and then the horror in Celeste's driveway, Kieran zip-tied, being dragged by a woman who thought HOA power made her judge and jury. That's when 20 years of courtroom training snapped into place. I shouted, "Release my son now," but I kept my distance. Needed. Mrs. Rodriguez's footage needed evidence. Celeste spun on me, still holding Kieran. "You're just a consultant," she spat, trying to bluff. I flashed my federal prosecutor badge. Her face went white. "You just committed felony kidnapping, unlawful restraint, and civil rights violations," I said, each word dropping like a hammer. "These are federal crimes, and you've done it in front of witnesses, on video." Kieran was nearly catatonic, wrists bleeding, breath ragged. "Mrs. Rodriguez, keep filming, call 911, tell them we have a federal crime in progress." At the words FBI response, Celeste's hands started to shake. She finally let Kieran go, but the damage was done. Minutes later, FBI agents arrived, light sirens, the works. Agent Sarah Chen took control, cuffed Celeste, read her rights. "You're under arrest for federal kidnapping, violation of civil rights, and assault on a federal dependent." The crowd of neighbors watched, some filming, some just stunned. When they searched Celeste's house, it got worse. Surveillance files on 17 other federal families detailed harassment plans, messages to anti-government extremists. It was never about property values. It was a hate campaign targeting children like Kieran as weak spots. Her community standards were just a front. That afternoon, at Phoenix Children's Hospital, the crisis counselor said Kieran was lucky his autism made the trauma easier to process, and his knack for pattern recognition had given us a warning nobody else would have caught. 6 months later, Celeste went down for 8 years. Our HOA dissolved, replaced by federal protections for families like ours. Kieran became a voice for neurodiversity, speaking at conferences, helping rewrite the rules, so what happened to him couldn't happen again. A year later, we got a letter from Celeste, now in therapy, working with disabled inmates, finally realizing her own grief didn't justify hurting others. When I showed it to Kieran, he wanted to visit her in prison. He said everyone deserves a second chance. That visit changed both of them, maybe all of us. Now Kieran's 15, speaking out for acceptance, preparing for college early, his story protecting families nationwide. Sometimes I wonder, what if he hadn't noticed the car, or Mrs. Rodriguez hadn't acted, or my badge wasn't enough? That question keeps me working every day, trying to make sure no family goes through what we did. If our story hits home for you, if you've ever felt different or targeted or just exhausted from fighting the same battles, don't stay silent. Sharing this story, hitting the like button, leaving a comment. These things help other families find hope, and they remind us all that different is not a flaw. Kieran always says, your brain works the way it's supposed to. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And he's right. Celeste gets out. In a few years, Kieran wants to go to her parole hearing not to keep her locked up, but to speak about forgiveness. He says everyone deserves to try again, even people who make big mistakes. I guess that's the kind of wisdom you get from seeing the world differently. Thanks for listening to our story. Keep fighting for acceptance, for safety, for the right to be yourself. And tell us, what would you have done in our place? What does justice look like when community lines get crossed and the people meant to protect us become the threat? We're listening.